They say justice comes to those who wait. But what if you've been silent for 62 years? That night, Naomi Avery wanted nothing more than a quiet birthday dinner. A table by the window, like everyone else. But Vellum House, the city's most exclusive restaurant, had other plans. They erased her, as if she'd never existed. This story begins with a stolen table, but it ends with the fall of an empire. And in the space between those two moments, a revolution they never saw coming. Preston Avery had never expected his evening to end like this. Metal twisting violently, sparks flying, and glass shattering in slow-motion clarity. It wasn't luck that kept him alive. It was sheer instinct. When the chaos finally settled, a heavy silence blanketed the wreckage. Preston felt a sharp, throbbing pain at his temple as he unbuckled his seatbelt with trembling fingers. Beside him, Ramon lay unconscious, but alive. "Ramon!" Preston called out urgently, shaking his driver's shoulder. No response. He quickly checked for a pulse, finding it steady but weak. He exhaled in relief. Ramon was alive. Barely. Staggering from the crumpled car onto the empty highway, Preston leaned heavily against the vehicle's mangled frame, chest heaving, mind racing. This wasn't a random accident. The brakes had given out at 70 miles per hour, a mechanical failure carefully engineered to appear innocent. They wanted him gone. He clenched his jaw, eyes narrowing in cold determination. Preston moved to the damaged trunk, its metal warped, but still intact. He forced it open, revealing a metal briefcase, its surface dented from the violent collision. With steady hands, he retrieved it and quickly flipped open the latches. Inside were documents detailing hidden truths behind Vellum House's polished facade. There it was. Reservation log, Naomi Avery, VIP, Table 1G, confirmed, 7 p.m. But beneath, in bold letters, the damning notation, reservation canceled, management override, Clinton Hale, GM. Seeing his mother's name crossed out with such cold finality felt like a physical blow, reigniting the anger and helplessness he'd felt the moment she called him from that lobby. Her voice calm yet wounded, dignified yet weary. "They told me my reservation didn't exist, Preston," she'd said softly, quietly resigned. "We both know why." He recalled his quiet promise. "I'll handle this, Mom." His mother had trusted him, believing he could make it right. Now, standing alone beside the wrecked Mercedes, Preston felt the crushing weight of her faith upon him. He knew the forces he faced weren't merely petty rivals or jealous competitors. They were powerful, entrenched, ruthless people who believed their privilege was invincible. But Preston had spent his life overcoming barriers set by those who considered themselves untouchable. He refused to step back now. The vibration of his phone startled him. Pulling it from his pocket, he saw Renee Cross's name glowing urgently on the screen. He took a steadying breath before answering. "Preston, are you okay?" Renee's voice trembled. "I'm fine," Preston said sharply. "They made their move, and failed. Should I alert the media?" "Not yet. Double my mother's security. Find out who tampered with my car." Renee paused. "You're sure?" "They crossed a line." Preston's tone hardened. "We have everything we need." "Be careful, Preston. This is bigger than a restaurant." "It was never just a table," he replied, determination clear. Ending the call, Preston stood alone on the dark highway, the evening sky deepening into shades of indigo. The distant city lights glowed on the horizon, calm and unaware of the storm about to break. They thought taking away his mother's table was a simple act, easily hidden behind polite smiles and digital erasures. They never imagined it would spark something far greater, a war that would expose everything they'd built on quiet cruelty and invisible lines of exclusion. Preston Avery knew this fight would demand everything he had. But standing there, battered yet unbowed, he welcomed it. Because for once, those who'd always silenced voices like his mother's would finally be forced to listen. This wasn't just a reckoning, it was a revolution, and they never saw it coming. Naomi Avery had spent a lifetime navigating silent rejections and subtle dismissals, each carefully hidden behind polite smiles and gracious words. At 62, she'd perfected the art of graceful composure, dignity etched into every movement, each carefully chosen word. Yet tonight, Naomi sensed something wrong. Naomi approached the hostess, a young woman whose welcoming smile seemed genuine, until Naomi quietly gave her name. "I'm sorry, your reservation isn't here," Naomi calmly insisted. "My son confirmed personally. Check again, please." The hostess bit her lip, clearly conflicted. Before she could respond, a shadow loomed beside her, and Clinton Hale, Vellum House's general manager, stepped forward. His expression bore a polite mask, but his eyes held something colder. "Is there a problem?" Clinton asked smoothly, offering Naomi a thin, practiced smile. The hostess hesitated. "Ms. Avery says she has a reservation, but—" "I'll handle this," Clinton interrupted gently, placing a reassuring hand briefly on the hostess's shoulder. Though his eyes never left Naomi, he leaned in slightly, lowering his voice. "I'm terribly sorry for any confusion, Miss Avery, but your name isn't on tonight's VIP list." Naomi held his gaze steadily. She saw behind the practiced politeness, understood the careful wording meant to diminish, to quietly erase her dignity. "Check once more, Mr. Hale. My son confirmed it." Clinton checked briefly, shook his head. "VIP's booked. Perhaps near the bar?" Naomi didn't flinch, didn't allow even the smallest flicker of disappointment to appear on her face. She knew precisely what was happening. She had known it the moment Clinton approached. Decades of subtle rejections had taught her exactly how to recognize these quiet exclusions, carefully orchestrated behind courteous facades. Naomi turned slowly, noticing a young, blonde socialite, radiantly confident, being ushered toward the very Garden View VIP table that had been promised to her. Her heart tightened briefly, not in surprise but weary recognition. Without a word, Naomi stepped aside gracefully. Her quiet dignity never faltered, even as embarrassment threatened to steal her breath. She reached discreetly for her phone and typed a brief, simple message to Preston. They took the table. Her son's reply came instantly, fiercely protective, deeply personal. "I'm coming." She slipped the phone away calmly and stood quietly, her back straight, eyes clear. She wouldn't give Clinton Hale or anyone at Vellum House the satisfaction of seeing her shaken. Naomi's pride and dignity had been forged through countless quiet battles, each one through grace rather than aggression. Yet tonight, something within her had irrevocably shifted. She felt it, a subtle yet profound shift in her heart, a quiet determination that this time would be different. For once, she wasn't alone. For once, she had someone willing to fight openly and forcefully on her behalf. Naomi knew Preston wouldn't let this stand quietly. She knew her son's fierce resolve, his deep integrity, the relentless drive behind his success, and she knew this stolen table wouldn't be quietly forgotten, wouldn't fade away as just another quiet slight. As she watched Clinton Hale return smoothly to his duties, smiling warmly at other guests as if nothing had happened, Naomi knew one thing clearly. Tonight would become far more than just another small injustice. It would become the catalyst for something much larger, a reckoning, quiet yet profound, long overdue. And those who had stolen her table, who believed themselves safely hidden behind privilege and power, had no idea of the storm quietly forming against them. Tonight, they had miscalculated. Tonight, Naomi Avery refused to fade quietly away. Tonight, for the first time, they would truly understand the cost of their quiet cruelty. Because tonight, Naomi's stolen table had ignited something that wouldn't be easily extinguished, a fire of justice that would burn bright enough for all to see. Daniel Locke had spent his life mastering the art of invisibility. It was survival, a skill learned early on as the quiet child in a loud world. At 28, working as a waiter at Vellum House, his invisibility was both his greatest strength and his most profound burden. Tonight, however, Daniel felt that carefully constructed wall of invisibility begin to fracture. Glancing carefully across the dining floor, Daniel waited until Clinton Hale had smoothly moved away, returning to his polished routine of greeting preferred guests. Daniel's pulse quickened as he slipped swiftly into the manager's back office. His hands trembled slightly as he photographed the evidence of Naomi's canceled reservation and sent an anonymous email. "You need to see this. Naomi Avery's reservation wasn't lost. It was deliberately canceled. I was there, and this is the proof." He attached the images carefully, fingers trembling as he hit send. The message vanished instantly, leaving Daniel standing frozen, staring blankly at the screen, heart pounding, breath ragged. What had he done? He returned quietly to the dining floor, heart still racing, a calm mask fixed on his face, practiced through years of invisible service. He moved gracefully, refilling glasses, quietly serving plates, unnoticed by diners who spoke softly about investments and vacations and other privileges he had never known. He glanced toward the entrance where Naomi had stood earlier, her dignity and quiet strength still lingering like a ghost in his mind. She had faced humiliation and quiet exclusion countless times before tonight, he knew. But this evening, witnessing her quiet grace had finally forced Daniel Locke to choose a side. Tonight, he had stepped out of the safety of invisibility and into a fight far greater than himself. He knew there would be consequences, that this quiet rebellion carried great risks. But for the first time, Daniel felt a sense of true courage. Because tonight, Daniel Locke had finally spoken up. Tonight, he had finally refused to be invisible. Tonight, his silence had ended, and Vellum House had no idea of the powerful storm quietly gathering against them. Preston Avery's private study was silent, except for the faint hum of electronics and the rhythmic tapping of his fingers against polished mahogany. The sweeping cityscape beyond the floor-to-ceiling windows glittered serenely in the dark, utterly unaware of the storm brewing within these quiet walls. He stared intently at his laptop screen, reading the anonymous email again, carefully, deliberately absorbing every detail Daniel Locke had bravely provided. Reservation logs, internal overrides, screenshots of orders coming directly from Clinton Hale himself. Each piece of evidence confirmed what Preston already suspected. His mother's stolen reservation wasn't isolated. It was just one tiny symptom of a deeply entrenched sickness, carefully hidden behind luxury and refined fayades. Yet even as anger simmered within him, Preston's mind remained cold, methodical, precise. This wasn't merely about revenge or retribution. It was bigger, far more profound. The entire system at Vellum House, quietly maintained by Langley Hospitality, thrived precisely because it remained hidden, invisible behind polite smiles and coded phrases. To dismantle it, Preston knew he needed more than outrage. He needed undeniable proof, clear, irrefutable, powerful enough to break through entrenched privilege and carefully constructed lies. He picked up the phone, dialing Renee Cross's number without hesitation. Her voice answered promptly, calm but alert. "Preston?" "You saw Daniel Locke's email?" Preston asked sharply, wasting no time on greetings. "Yes," Renee replied steadily. "It's solid evidence. But we both know Langley will counter quickly." Preston nodded slowly. "Then we move faster. I need detailed background checks on Clinton Hale, Veronica Langley, and every key executive at Langley Hospitality. Financial records, previous lawsuits, internal emails, social media, find anything we can leverage. They've thrived by staying invisible. We're going to shine a very public spotlight on everything they've hidden." Renee hesitated slightly, caution coloring her voice. "Preston, this isn't just a legal battle. These people wield enormous influence: politicians, media, law enforcement. Once we move, there's no turning back." Preston exhaled slowly, leaning back in his chair. For a moment, his careful composure slipped slightly, exposing the weight pressing heavily upon him. "I know," he admitted quietly, "but the cost of staying silent now is far higher than the risk we face by speaking out." Renee's voice softened gently. "It's personal for you, I understand that. But remember, they fight dirty, and the higher we aim, the more fiercely they'll retaliate." Preston paused, recalling Naomi's quiet dignity, her quiet courage despite countless silent humiliations. He remembered vividly the evening she'd called him, her voice calm but wounded, her quiet words etched indelibly in his mind. "They told me my reservation didn't exist. We both know why." He remembered clearly the ache in his chest, his silent fury at the casual cruelty his mother had endured yet again. Preston straightened slowly, his voice regaining steel, determination crystallizing within him. "We don't have a choice, Renee," he said firmly. "They've been allowed to operate quietly for decades because everyone was too afraid or too comfortable to confront them. That ends now." "I'll start gathering everything immediately," Renee replied decisively. "But be prepared. When we strike, they'll try to crush us." Preston's jaw tightened slightly, eyes sharp with unwavering resolve. "Let them try. This time, the world will be watching." After ending the call, Preston rose slowly, pacing quietly across the plush carpet. He stopped by the windows, gazing down at the peaceful, glittering city below. A city built and sustained by people like his mother, whose quiet sacrifices, dignity, and strength had gone unnoticed and unrecognized for far too long. Tonight, he felt a deep, profound responsibility settling firmly upon his shoulders. He knew this wasn't simply about exposing Clinton Hale or even Veronica Langley's empire. This was about challenging an entire system of quiet exclusion, one built upon silent complicity and subtle discrimination, hidden carefully behind refined facades and expensive suits. He glanced again at Daniel Locke's email, felt renewed admiration for the quiet courage it had taken for the young waiter to step out of invisibility and speak the truth. Preston realized this fight had grown larger than himself, larger even than his own family. It was about finally forcing those who hid behind privilege and power to face the consequences of their quiet cruelty. Preston stood quietly in the dark study, heart heavy yet resolute, knowing the true battle was only just beginning. His mother's stolen table had started this war, but it would take more than outrage to win it. It required proof, strength, and unwavering courage. And most importantly, it required exposing the truth hiding quietly behind carefully constructed lies. Tonight, Preston Avery made a quiet but irrevocable vow. He would no longer allow silence to shield injustice. Tonight, he would step fully into the spotlight, exposing every hidden corner of Langley's quiet empire. Tonight, the curtain hiding their invisible cruelty would finally be torn down. And tonight, the world would finally be forced to see what had quietly existed in the shadows for far too long. Veronica Langley entered the upscale private lounge exactly 10 minutes late, a calculated maneuver she had perfected long ago. Her gaze settled sharply on Preston Avery, who sat patiently waiting, his demeanor equally composed, equally dangerous. "Preston," Veronica greeted coolly. "Serious accusations, think carefully." Preston replied sharply, "Your empire thrived on silence. It's over." "I have proof." She straightened her back, her eyes narrowed sharply, her voice lowering dangerously. "Veronica, think carefully. People prefer quiet comfort over truths. Preston, you underestimate them. The voices you've silenced will now speak." Veronica, "Challenge us and we'll dismantle everything you hold dear." Preston, "You believe you're untouchable, but you've made your mistake. Your threats only confirm your fear of accountability." Veronica paused, momentarily speechless, eyes darkening with anger. She rose swiftly, her voice brittle with carefully controlled fury. "You'll regret this, Preston. You're not just challenging me, you're challenging a system that has survived because it always crushes those who dare defy it." Preston stood slowly, facing her with quiet confidence. "Perhaps, but for the first time, your invisible empire has met an opponent willing to risk everything to dismantle it. I have seen behind the curtain. Veronica and I refuse to look away." She hesitated for a single tense moment, recognizing clearly his unwavering resolve. Then, without another word, Veronica turned sharply, leaving the lounge with hurried, rigid strides. Preston exhaled slowly as the door closed quietly behind her, feeling the full weight of the confrontation settling over him. He understood clearly the dangerous gamble he'd taken, the immense power and influence Veronica Langley wielded. But he also knew retreating now would only ensure the continued silence of voices that had been ignored for far too long. He turned slowly toward the lounge's broad windows, staring out across the glittering city below, his mind clear and resolute. Tonight, he'd drawn clear battle lines, declaring openly his intent to challenge a system few ever dared confront. Tonight, he'd forced Veronica Langley into the open, exposed the quiet cruelty hidden behind her carefully constructed facade. Preston knew the fight ahead would be brutal, ruthless, and deeply personal. But tonight, standing alone in the quiet aftermath, he felt no regret, only quiet certainty. Veronica Langley and her family believed themselves invincible, shielded behind privilege, wealth, and influence. But tonight, they'd discovered something powerful and terrifying. For the first time, someone had seen clearly through their invisible fortress. And Preston Avery was ready to tear it down piece by piece. The blowback was swift, ruthless, and meticulously orchestrated. Within days, Preston Avery felt the full force of Langley Hospitality's retaliatory machinery. A silent yet devastating attack launched from multiple fronts, each carefully calculated to dismantle his resolve. The morning news became the first weapon. Preston faced immediate backlash. Negative media coverage, project delays, investors pulling out, and Daniel Locke's sudden disappearance. Preston's heart tightened painfully as the stark realization settled heavily upon him. They had gotten to Daniel. The quiet threat behind Veronica Langley's parting words now echoed ominously in his mind. "We always crush those who defy us." Fury surged within Preston as he saw Naomi targeted. He quickly ordered Renee to secure his mother and find Daniel. Renee hesitated slightly, her voice carefully gentle. "Preston, please be cautious. They're powerful and ruthless. They don't just want you silenced, they want you broken." Preston's voice was cold steel. "Then they've already failed, because the moment they threatened my mother, they made this fight deeply personal. I'm not broken. I'm ready." After ending the call, Preston paced the room restlessly, his pulse racing. He understood clearly the magnitude of the fight he'd chosen, knew he was confronting forces deeply entrenched, fiercely protected, and ruthlessly efficient. Yet, tonight, beneath his anger and concern, Preston felt something else stirring: quiet defiance, unwavering determination, a profound refusal to surrender to their quiet cruelty. He stopped abruptly before the wide windows, gazing across the glittering city skyline. Somewhere beneath those peaceful lights, Veronica Langley and her family slept quietly, confident that their empire would survive, protected by power, privilege, and fear. But tonight, Preston quietly vowed that this invisible fortress of theirs, built upon intimidation and hidden injustice, would fall. They believed they were untouchable, insulated by their silent threats and carefully constructed influence. Yet tonight, they had finally made the one mistake that would ensure their defeat. They had underestimated the fierce resilience of someone they believed they could break. Preston Avery stood quietly, unyielding, understanding clearly the dangerous path ahead. Yet despite the risk, he felt an unwavering resolve solidifying within him. This wasn't merely a battle over stolen tables or quiet humiliations. It was now a full-scale war against a system designed to crush voices, erase dignity, and maintain power through fear. But this time, they had chosen the wrong target. Because this time, Preston wasn't fighting just for himself. He was fighting for Naomi, for Daniel, for every invisible voice silenced by quiet threats and hidden exclusion. Tonight, the Empire had struck back with ruthless clarity. But tonight, Preston Avery knew something Veronica Langley had failed to grasp clearly enough. This wasn't just his fight. It belonged to everyone who had ever been quietly crushed and forced into silence. And they were all about to find their voices. The breaking point arrived quietly, just after dawn, a single spark igniting a firestorm. Preston Avery awoke to a flood of urgent texts and missed calls from Renee Cross. "Turn on the news immediately," her message read, urgent and direct. His pulse quickened as he switched on the television, heart pounding fiercely at what he saw. Daniel Locke had reappeared. His carefully recorded statement filled every screen uploaded overnight, spreading rapidly across social media, news networks, and public forums. Daniel's voice shook slightly, but his words were clear and powerful. "I'm Daniel Locke. Naomi Avery's table wasn't accidentally lost. It was intentional. Silence ends now." Preston's heart tightened with fierce pride as Daniel's calm, courageous confession continued, meticulously revealing damning evidence screenshots, internal emails, detailed instructions from Clinton Hale himself. Each document painted a devastatingly clear picture, a systemic, deliberate pattern of exclusion implemented at the highest level of Langley hospitality. Daniel's statement went viral, sparking national outrage. Watching silently from his penthouse, Preston felt no sense of triumph, only profound relief and a deep, quiet pride. Daniel Locke, once carefully invisible, had become the powerful voice of countless, quiet injustices. And now, that voice was impossible to silence. His phone rang suddenly, breaking through the flood of messages and alerts. It was Renee, her voice tense but energized. "Preston, everything is shifting. Veronica Langley's publicists are scrambling. Investors are abandoning ship, politicians distancing themselves. We've reached critical mass." Preston exhaled slowly, absorbing the reality of this turning point. "What about Daniel?" he asked urgently. "Is he safe?" "Yes," Renee confirmed immediately, relief coloring her words. "He's with our security team now, safely secured. He wanted me to thank you for believing him, for giving him the courage to speak." Preston's throat tightened slightly with quiet emotion. "He never needed my courage," he replied firmly. "It was always his own." He paused briefly, feeling the heavy weight of what Daniel had just risked, the tremendous courage it took to step out of invisibility. "Arrange immediate protection for him and his family," Preston instructed, "and publicly declare our full support and gratitude. Daniel deserves our protection and our voice." "I'll handle it," Renee assured him confidently. "But Preston, remember, Langley hospitality won't collapse quietly. This isn't over." Preston's eyes hardened quietly, determination etched deeply into his expression. "No, it's not," he agreed solemnly. "But now, the entire world sees the truth clearly. Langley's empire was built on quiet lies. Tonight, those lies finally crumble." After ending the call, Preston stood silently, watching as the news broadcast repeated Daniel Locke's powerful words. He felt a profound shift settling deeply within him, relief, resolve, and quiet certainty mingling together. Veronica Langley's invisible fortress had finally been exposed clearly, the carefully hidden injustices now laid bare beneath the stark spotlight of truth. Preston knew the fight wasn't over, understood clearly that powerful people like Veronica Langley never surrendered easily. Yet tonight, he felt something even more profound: hope. Daniel Locke had shown that even the quietest, most invisible voices could ignite profound change. Tonight, one stolen table had sparked something far greater than he ever imagined possible. Tonight, quiet courage had broken decades of silence, shattering the fade of privilege and power that had hidden injustice for far too long. As Preston stood quietly, watching the city awaken beneath the rising sun, he understood clearly the deeper truth Daniel Locke had revealed. Real change wasn't built solely upon strength, or power, or influence. It began with quiet bravery, with someone finally daring to speak clearly and truthfully despite fear. Tonight, Daniel Locke had given countless silent voices courage to speak. Tonight, Naomi Avery's stolen table had finally ignited a powerful truth, impossible to silence. And tonight, Langley's carefully invisible empire had finally begun its quiet, inevitable collapse. Within days, Langley Hospitality's carefully constructed empire began unraveling with breathtaking speed. The shockwaves of Daniel Locke's revelations tore swiftly through boardrooms and city hall chambers, shattering reputations and alliances meticulously built over decades. Investors fled, quietly but decisively, their support evaporating overnight. Politicians, once staunch allies who had enjoyed Langley's quiet favors and generous contributions, now distanced themselves swiftly, issuing carefully worded statements condemning discrimination. Even Clinton Hale, the polished face of Vellum House's quiet exclusion, quietly resigned in disgrace, vanishing from public view without a trace. At the center of the storm stood Veronica Langley, her calm veneer shattered, replaced by a cold fury no longer hidden behind polished smiles. From her penthouse suite overlooking the city, she watched helplessly as news anchors relentlessly dissected the empire she'd once believed unbreakable. Her carefully maintained composure finally collapsed beneath the unbearable weight of public shame. Meanwhile, Daniel Locke stepped fully into the spotlight he'd once desperately avoided. Journalists, community leaders, and activists flocked to his side, eager to amplify the quiet courage that had finally broken decades of silence. Daniel's voice was steady, his message clear. This isn't just about one restaurant or one stolen table. It's about breaking a system that thrives quietly, unseen. We can't allow silence to protect injustice anymore. Preston Avery watched with quiet pride as Daniel Locke, once invisible, became a powerful voice for justice. He felt a quiet surge of gratitude for Daniel's courage, recognizing clearly that it had ignited something far larger than any single battle against Veronica Langley. But even amidst triumph, Preston felt little satisfaction. Instead, he was acutely aware of the heavy toll this fight had taken, the emotional cost his mother had quietly endured, the threats and intimidation Daniel faced bravely, and the powerful opponents who still quietly lurked, determined to rebuild their shattered fortress. Late one evening, Naomi sat quietly with Preston in his apartment, the city lights glittering serenely below them. She spoke softly, her voice gentle yet profoundly strong. "Did you ever imagine it would lead here?" Preston exhaled slowly, reflecting on everything they'd quietly endured, every carefully hidden injustice they'd exposed. "Not at first," he admitted gently. "I thought it was just about your table. But I see now that table represented far more, everything quietly wrong about a system built to exclude, erase, and silence." Naomi smiled softly, pride shining clearly in her eyes. "You gave me a voice, Preston. You gave everyone who ever quietly suffered exclusion a voice." Preston shook his head quietly, humility clear in his expression. "I didn't give anyone a voice, Mom. Those voices were always there. Daniel had his own courage. You had your own dignity. All I did was help show the world what had always quietly existed." Naomi's eyes softened gently, her voice quietly profound. "You've helped people see that injustice thrives on silence. You broke that silence, and that's something to be proud of." Their quiet conversation was interrupted by Renee, stepping carefully into the room, her eyes urgent yet hopeful. "Preston, Veronica Langley just issued a statement she's resigning. Langley Hospitality is closing Vellum House permanently." Preston's heart tightened briefly with quiet relief and sorrow mingled together. He understood the profound significance clearly. The end of an era. The quiet dismantling of a symbol built on decades of subtle cruelty. Naomi squeezed Preston's hand gently, warmth and pride clear in her voice. "They never saw us coming, Preston." He met his mother's steady gaze, quiet strength filling his heart. "No," he agreed softly, determination clear. They believed silence meant weakness. They never understood silence could hide quiet strength. When standing quietly beside his mother, Preston felt a deep, quiet certainty settling within him. The fight wasn't over. Injustice had existed quietly, hidden for generations. There would always be another battle, another quiet cruelty needing exposure. Yet tonight, they'd achieved something profoundly meaningful, a reckoning long overdue, exposing clearly the invisible empire built upon quiet injustice. Tonight, Naomi Avery's quiet dignity had finally triumphed over quiet cruelty. Tonight, Daniel Locke's quiet courage had inspired countless others to refuse silence any longer. Tonight, the truth had finally broken free, igniting a quiet but powerful revolution impossible to ignore. And tonight, standing quietly together in the glow of victory, Naomi and Preston knew clearly the true legacy they'd built, the understanding that true justice could only flourish once silence was broken, once quiet voices finally spoke clearly enough for the entire world to hear. 2 months later, Vellum House reopened as Naomi's table, now a symbol of inclusion and dignity. Naomi Avery stepped through the entrance quietly, her son by her side. She paused momentarily, absorbing the transformation. Her eyes glistened with quiet emotion, her breath catching slightly at the profound meaning this place now embodied. Preston gently took her arm, guiding her forward to the very VIP table that had once been deliberately stolen from her, the table that had ignited a powerful reckoning. Waiting for them was Daniel Locke, now proudly wearing the title of General Manager. He approached Naomi, his eyes bright with gratitude and humility. "Welcome, Ms. Avery," he said warmly, his voice confident yet respectful. "Your table awaits." Naomi smiled gently, warmth radiating clearly from her expression. She reached out, taking Daniel's hand in quiet appreciation. "Thank you, Daniel, for your courage. None of this would have happened without you." Daniel shook his head modestly, voice quiet yet firm. "You inspired this, Ms. Avery. Your dignity, your strength. You showed all of us the true meaning of courage." Naomi sat gracefully at the table, Preston quietly joining her. They shared a quiet moment, surrounded by laughter and conversation from the diverse, welcoming crowd around them. This was no longer a symbol of exclusion. Instead, it was a testament to quiet bravery, dignity, and profound change. Across town, Veronica Langley watched silently as her empire collapsed. Inside Naomi's table, Renee Cross approached Preston discreetly, her eyes bright with quiet pride. "We did it," she whispered gently. "We changed everything." Preston glanced warmly at Naomi, quietly absorbing the profound truth behind Renee's words. "No," he corrected softly, voice gentle but clear. "They did it. My mother, Daniel, they were the ones who truly changed things. We just helped the world finally hear them." Later that evening, as Naomi and Preston quietly finished dinner beneath soft lights, she turned toward her son, speaking gently, yet profoundly. "Do you think this will last, Preston?" Preston: "Yes. Once the truth is seen, it can't be hidden." Naomi: "It started with one stolen table." Preston: "One table, one voice. That's all it ever takes." The night sky stretched silently above Naomi's table, filled with stars twinkling quietly over the city, now profoundly changed. Weeks had passed since its grand reopening, yet the steady hum of conversations and laughter still filled the dining room, a constant, reassuring reminder of the justice they had fought to build. Naomi Avery sat quietly at the very table she had once been denied, her eyes thoughtful as she watched the vibrant tapestry of people gathered within the elegant walls. Beside her, Preston quietly observed his mother, noting the gentle pride etched into her expression, the quiet strength he had always admired so deeply. He finally spoke, his voice gentle, yet profoundly sincere. "How do you feel, Mom? After everything, seeing what we built together?" Naomi paused, reflecting deeply. When she finally spoke, her voice was soft but resolute. "I feel grateful, Preston. Not just for what we've achieved, but for the courage of those who refuse to remain quiet any longer." Across the dining floor, Daniel Locke moved confidently among the guests, no longer invisible. His quiet courage had become a powerful catalyst, inspiring countless others to speak out against hidden injustices. Daniel approached the Avery table, warmth clear in his eyes. "Ms. Avery, Preston," he greeted respectfully. "I wanted to thank you once again, not just for giving me a voice, but for showing me the power of quiet dignity and true courage." Naomi smiled softly, reaching gently for Daniel's hand. "Your courage was always there, Daniel. All you needed was the chance to show it clearly. I'm proud of you." Daniel nodded humbly, eyes bright with quiet pride. "You gave me that chance, Ms. Avery, both of you, and I promise you I won't ever take it for granted." As Daniel moved quietly away, Naomi turned once again toward Preston, her eyes reflective. "Will this endure?" Naomi asked softly. Preston nodded. "The truth, once seen, can't be hidden again." Naomi nodded slowly, absorbing the quiet wisdom behind her son's words. Around them, the restaurant buzzed with life, a testament to the profound, quiet revolution they had ignited. She knew clearly that this place had become more than bricks and glass, more than simply reclaimed dignity. This was their quiet legacy, a legacy born of courage, nourished by truth, and sustained through countless voices now able to speak clearly, heard by the world. Across town, Veronica Langley sat alone in quiet solitude, her former empire dismantled, her once unbreakable facade shattered. She finally understood clearly what she'd always refused to acknowledge: the quiet strength of dignity, the profound power behind voices she'd casually dismissed. Though bitterness lingered, tonight she felt something new: humility and genuine regret for her failings. Back at Naomi's table, Preston stood slowly, offering his mother his hand, his voice quiet yet profoundly strong. "Shall we go, Mom?" Naomi rose gracefully, smiling gently as she accepted his hand. They walked together quietly toward the exit, passing Daniel, Renee Cross, and countless others whose courage had profoundly reshaped everything. Each face, each quiet greeting, reinforced the legacy they'd quietly forged, one built upon dignity, justice, and a refusal to accept quiet cruelty any longer. As they stepped outside into the gentle night, Naomi paused, looking quietly upward at the stars shining clearly above them. She spoke softly, her voice filled with quiet, profound certainty. "Preston, it feels like we've built something truly lasting, something that won't quietly fade with time." He gently squeezed her hand, heart quietly full of gratitude, pride, and deep humility. "We did, Mom. One voice, one table, one quiet courage at a time." They stood quietly beneath the stars, both clearly aware of the profound truth behind their journey. True change wasn't built overnight. It began with a single, quiet voice, brave enough to speak, a single stolen table powerful enough to ignite lasting justice. Tonight, Naomi and Preston Avery had finally reclaimed what had quietly been taken from them. Not just dignity or recognition, but something far more meaningful: a lasting legacy of courage, dignity, and profound change that no one could ever quietly erase. And tonight, beneath the quiet stars, they finally understood clearly the deepest truth behind everything they'd endured. Sometimes, all it took to change the world was one quiet voice, finally refusing to remain silent. Naomi smiled gently, quietly certain of this truth. "They never saw this coming, Preston," she whispered softly, profoundly proud. "They never saw us." Preston smiled quietly, meeting his mother's steady gaze. "No," he agreed warmly, voice gentle, yet deeply certain. But they finally heard us. Together, they turned quietly toward home, hearts full, the legacy they'd quietly built now firmly, irrevocably, part of a world forever changed. Tonight, one stolen table had finally become countless new tables, each ready to welcome, hear, and truly honor every quiet voice brave enough to speak clearly and refuse silence any longer. Tonight, Naomi Avery's quiet dignity had become the lasting, unbreakable foundation of a world forever changed one voice, one table, one quiet moment of courage at a time.